She had us. Both of us. Absolutely round her finger. Fundamentally, she achieved this through the way she looked at us. It shouldn't have been a surprise that the way she moved her head to one side should leave me basically on my knees, or more akin, I should say, to a slightly tepid pool of just water. But what was more surprising was the effect it had on him. Anything she wanted, he gave to her. Anything she demanded, he agreed to. And he agreed to everything with this same little smile on his face. Smile of a man, in actual fact, is little more than 4 years old. I'm not saying I wouldn't have agreed to the same and more in his position, but it just seemed in some way more what? Downright surprising coming from him. He wasn't that kind of man. He was a soldier. When I say was, I mean was. I mean he used to be. Between 1968 and 1984, he was a soldier in the British infantry. He reached the rank of lieutenant colonel. He did 5 tours of Northern Ireland. And this was when, doing a tour in Northern Ireland was more than just a few games of pool, chat with some kids outside a fish and chip shop. Some of the photographs he took. He used to have a Polaroid camera, and some of the things that, after he'd had a few drinks, he'd take out of his box to show me. You wouldn't have thought they were in Northern Ireland. There was some about them that I found in some way surprising. He always refused to talk about South Georgia. He never mentioned it. I asked him about it one time, and his face turned within the matter of a few seconds, literally grey, slate grey. And even when he eventually retired from the army, he retrained as a maths teacher, for Christ's sake. I'd have liked to seen him teach. Oh, I can imagine the kind of teacher he was. I don't think he would have worn many cords. I don't think he would have shared too many coffees with the sixth formers. Come and play with me! Read me a story! Can I sit on your lap? Where's Grandpops? Oh, there he is! Not his kind of scene, But he did it with her. First thing I learned about photography, I learned when I was a kid. If you're taking a portrait photograph, if you possibly can, take it from below the subject. It actually renders the subject, oddly, what it does is it renders them not more heroic, not more godlike. Oddly, it renders them more human. And if you could take it in natural light, if you can capture the way the light falls at the start of or at the end of a day especially, then it can be. He used to try to convince me that the existence of the understanding of the relevance of the possible uses of the irrational number, which is commonly and historically and commonly known as pi, that is to 5 decimal places, the number 3.14159 is irrevocable proof of the existence of God. It's just so illogical, he told us, that it could ever work, that it must just prove that there's something more than us. That proves something. I think he's wrong. I told him, I think you're wrong. I told him, for somebody so palpably intelligent, Arthur, sometimes you think like your head's full of wool. He liked me. We talk about beer together. He never bothered about me coming from. He watched an unusual amount of tennis. Everything was tennis with him. His conversations were peppered with tennis metaphors. Sometimes I'd watch tennis with him, but I never liked it much. Is it a terrible thing to say that sometimes the company of men is kind of in some way comforting? I don't mean it to sound, I don't mean anything other than. He had a house in the eastern suburbs of Toulon, in a town called Cocheron, in the south of fucking France, for fuck's sake. When I go there with Helen for the first time, we drive in her car. She's kind of a mix between being a bit embarrassed, because ostensibly, at least at the time, we're kind of what? Socialists? And just being really fucking proud because her dad has a house in the south of France and she's taking me there and she's paying for the ferry because I'm skint. And she keeps going on about how odd he is, but how she has a feeling that she thinks I'll like him. And I do. It's one of the things she says she likes about me. I like people. People like me. They think I'm gentle. I had absolutely no idea that people thought I was gentle. And she says she really likes this bit. This bit is one of the best bits of a man, she says. Which is a phrase that just about sends me completely insane with love for her. And her nose. And her smile and everything. Lucy was a cesarean. And there was a moment when Helen was in labour when I thought she could have died. And I am a bit embarrassed now because I had to go into the toilet to change into my, what are they called? Scrubs, is it? When I had to change into my scrubs, I did have a bit of a cry. And when I did, I did ask God, who I don't fucking think is even there in the first place, to make sure that Helen was all right. I said we could survive if we lose the baby, but I don't think I could make it if she went and died on me. It's like talking to a photograph or the mirror, which isn't to discount it completely, but it's not God. Second time I go to his house, after we've been going out now for 2 years, he takes me diving. He's become a big fan of scuba diving in the 18 months that Helen and I have been going out, which is maybe a surprising character development in a man of his age, but he's a surprising man. Between Saint-Tropez and the Ile de Pokerol, there are, he says, actual shipwrecks that you can actually dive on. Would I like to come? I've never worn a wetsuit before, and it takes me a little bit longer to get into, and it makes me feel a bit fat. He tells me he's gonna take me to the seawall. I ask him, what? He says, the seawall! This makes no sense to me at all. There's a wall in the sea. Drops down. Hundreds of feet. I had no idea that the bed of the sea was built like that. I thought it was a gradual slope. He'd brought us these bags with bits of bread in, and you don't lose the bread because it naturally floats upwards. And he takes us to the wall and swimming there. Even with the sun as bright as it is above us, and it is a bright day. Even then, the darkness and the fall that the wall in the sea reveals is as terrifying as anything I've ever seen. You get back to the surface, of course, and the idea that there ever wasn't a seawall down there in the first place is a bit embarrassing, frankly. I mean, what did I actually think the seabed was made of? When Helen's giving birth to Lucy, the midwife calls to me, "Daddy, do you want to see your baby born?" They've built this little tent. I look over the edge of the tent and I'm one of those people who I never know where to look when people point things out to me. Like, I'm a kid and I'm driving along and Mom says, "Look, a Castrol!" or "Oh, look, a plane!" And I haven't the faintest idea what to look at. I just smile, nod dumbly and say, "Oh yeah!" But I'm completely lying. And this is a bit like that. Mainly, I see the yellow at the inside of her stomach. Once you've seen the inside of somebody's stomach, I think your relationship then moves to what? A new level. I love her completely. With every bone and bit of skin of me. And it's been very rare the times when she's cried and I've comforted her. I'm fucking crying all the fucking time. I can't watch an episode of ER without just being a wreck. I cried Extreme Home Makeover reruns when the person comes back and they've had their garden done up as a surprise. We go there to his house every year for our holidays. We did used to drive all the way down from London without stopping. We promised to share the navigating, but we didn't need any help. We did it fine. When Lucy was born, we started flying there though, because the driving's not fair on a baby, and he'd buy us the tickets. You can get flights to Carcassonne for dead cheap, but he'd pay for us to fly into Nice, and he'd buy us a car when we got there. The first time he sees her, he takes her by surprise a bit. He looms over from behind her, and he's wearing his glasses, these big old glasses. Looms over from behind her, and she screams like living shit, believe me. Took her about 3 weeks to recover from that. But she did. And then she'd start with the shuffling across the floor, reaching up to him, making these little noises that basically mean, "Put me on your lap and read me a story now, you funny old fucker. I don't care if you're meant to be weird. I don't care if you're meant to be scary. I don't care what anyone fucking thinks about you. I want a story and I want it now." Who could resist that? She starts wearing cardigans, and that's me done for. One time, I say to him, if there's a God, is he a man? And the question catches him by surprise a bit. But after a while he says that yes, in the end he thinks that God is probably a man. So I say to him, what does he look like? Does he have a beard? Does he wear robes? Does he have long white hair? He says to me that the thing about God is that whatever I think he looks like, well, he'll look the absolute opposite to that. And whatever I think he's least likely to look like, that is what he will look like. So I ask him if he means God looks a bit like Gary Glitter, and he tells me not to be so bloody silly. So I say to him, if you can't tell me what he looks like, if you don't know what he looks like, and he doesn't look like anything, how do you know that he's anything more than just an idea? Something you made up. She's 8. We've talked for years about having a second child, but every time we talk about it, we just think about Lucy, and we just think, you know what? We just want her. She's clever. She's funny. She's very, very pretty. She's Helen's sidekick. She's my sweetheart. They make little wisecracks about me. 2 of them stand there sizing me up. But I know that if they push it too far, she'll come running over, put her arms around me, because the idea of properly making me sad makes her feel a little bit sick. In the 8 years that she's been born, I fucked a lot of things up. And somehow, largely by the skin of my teeth, managed to largely come out unscathed. And me and Helen, we're doing okay. You know, we have little routines and stuff like about the shopping or the cooking or the dishwasher. I love to cook for her, but compared to her, I'm shit at it. So when she cooks, it's properly a treat. We have all these little routines, but it's like we fucking love them rather than finding them what? Restricting. Sometimes when you swim in the sea, the force of the waves can crash right against you. It can knock you over. There have been times when just trying to get out of the sea, I've been knocked over. 2 summers ago this happened. I cracked my coccyx on a stone on the shore's edge, flailed about like some kind of huge seal. I was at that moment the mathematical polar opposite of Daniel Craig. Doesn't get like this normally where he is. Normally, the sea is warm there, which is quite an unusual feeling for me. I always swim out as far as I think is safe, stop, swim another 10 strokes, stop, and then swim back. Sometimes you think the tide's caught you. You panic because you think you're not moving. You are. You just need to turn on your back, collect your breathing, kick slowly. You're moving. I ask him, where is he? He says, who? I say, God. Where is he? Is he in the sky? That's where people used to think he was. Children and medieval people. Is he on the edge of our solar system? Is he on the edge of our galaxy? Because every time we think we've located where he must be, we find out something else, and we realize that God can't be there. Is he on the edge of our universe? On the very edges of the universe that take on the form of the time of the Big Bang, that have that kind of density? Is he there? Is that where he is? He says, we don't know everything, Alex. There are some things we don't know. There are things we can't explain. I tell him now. He says, what? I say we can't explain them now, but that don't mean they have no reason. It just illustrates the gaps in our knowledge. Don't mean we won't be able to explain them one day, because I think we will. I want to acknowledge something. And it's embarrassing because it's something you probably have noticed. There's a hole running through the middle of my stomach. You must have felt really awkward because you could probably see it, even in this light. Mostly, people choose not to talk about it. Some people say, hey Alex, what's that? You appear to have a great big hole running right through the middle of you. I'd started doing okay. You know, I got a, sounds stupid, but I got a contract with British Home Stores. I took all the photographs for their menswear, the women's wear, the back to school stuff, the homeware. I made so much money taking photographs of cushions and saucepans and digital alarm clocks. I can barely believe it myself. 5 weeks ago, just before we go, just before all the packing and the frantic stuff about what we're gonna take, Helen's buying some stuff to take with us. She's got Lucy all her new stuff, her cozy, her books, her toys for the flight. And she got me some shades which were properly pucker, seriously. Very Poncherello from Chips. And she asked me to come into the bedroom because there's something she wants to show me. And I get there and she's wearing this dress. It's a blue dress with this drop back. And she asked me to tell her what I think. I swear for about 30 seconds I couldn't speak. She looked. Oh, and the idea that I was married to her and that we had our girl and this was our life. There's a man in the market in Portgromont that we visit on our second night there, and he sells us a case of claret for the equivalent of about 15 quid, and it is like heaven. We drink 2 bottles on our second night there. Next day, Helen has to go to the supermarket because she wants to get some bread and some shampoo for Lucy, and I need some athlete's foot cream. And they have these little vanilla yogurts, these little pots of vanilla flavored yogurt. And she wants to get some cheese. It's fun getting it from the market, but as it goes, it's a proper rip-off. So she wants to go to the supermarket, which is where most of the French people go anyway. So me and Arthur go down with Lucy, down to the sea. There's a bay just near his house, and around the corner from the bay there's this cove that you can climb onto. And it's actually near his house, and it's more secluded, and it's quiet, and it's lovely, and we talk about it and we decide to go there. She can go into this world. You ever know any kids like that? When she thinks nobody's looking, she could just start going off further and further into her imagination, playing games all by herself. Actually, what she's doing is she's talking to herself, which some people might find a bit disconcerting, but I just love to watch her. He says to me one time, he looks at me and he says, he's in the feeling of water. Sometimes there's the shape of the roll of land. He's in the way some people move. He's in the light, falling over a city at the start of an evening. He's in the space between 2 numbers. You know what the cruelest thing I ever did to anybody was? I'll tell you. I've started getting into detective fiction. I have a friend who works at St. Mary's University. He said to me, Alex, all fiction is detective fiction. He's completely wrong. Jane Austen isn't detective fiction. Franz Kafka isn't detective fiction. Bridget Jones isn't detective fiction. Detective fiction is detective fiction. James Ellroy. Arthur Goes for a Swim. I'm reading L.A. Noire. Bit where the cop and the killer are in the deserted car park, meet at midnight. Lights out, neither knowing whether the other is there. Lucy's kind of being a Power Ranger. He comes back. The water's amazing, he says. He dries off and I notice his feet. The skin on his feet is unusually battered and cracked. It's one of those moments you kind of rumble to yourself that he's a little old. He tells me I can go for a swim. And I do. And the water is amazing. I wade past the first bank, I go out and out and out around the bay and the light. That time of day, light on the Mediterranean is. And the sea is warm. I turn round. I'm about 20 yards out. The sky is this huge blue curve. I can see the houses on top of the road. I can see his house. I can see Arthur sitting reading. Water dripping onto his book. He's reading some history of China. He's really into it. I can see the swimmers around the corner of the bay. I can see Lucy playing behind him, running about a bit, playing Power Rangers. It's odd because he's so into his book that he doesn't notice that she does a little bit of a jump and she slips and stumbles. She tries to correct the weight of her fall, but in trying to correct the weight of her balance, she ends up putting more weight on her back foot. And it's weird to look at because she falls off the edge of this 6-foot high cliff and she's really close to some of the rocks there, and she ends up falling and cracking her head on some of the jagged rocks at the bottom of the cliff, and I could see it all clearly, but it's weird to look at because I can't hear anything. And it's weird watching it with no sound. Like if the sound's off on the telly, it's always a bit strange. I start panicking, which is stupid because I'm swimming, and when you swim and you're panicking, you can't breathe properly, so I tell myself, concentrate on your breathing. I see 2 swimmers that have stopped their swimming and run over to where she is, and I see him pick her up. He's torn between running back to the house to call an ambulance and waiting for me. I get there in enough time for him not to have to worry about this for too long. I go to her. I take her from him. There is, which is surprising to me, is there's a handful of blood in her hair. It's thick and matted, and her hair's all chewed up by it. I read that it's a process. It's never absolutely instantaneous. The injury causes the death of brain cells, so signals are no longer sent to the lungs, and bit by bit, the machine closes down. Her blood sticks to my hands. I carry up the path of the cove, and people are stopping, looking at me, stopping still in their tracks, talking to me in French, and I'm kind of aware that I'm kind of not crying. I look like, fuck, I don't know. As I take her back into the house, I'm walking through the sliding glass doors, and I bang her head against the wall, and I'm talking to her, which is stupid, and I tell her sorry for hitting her head. But part of me's thinking, well, fuck it now. I may as well just drag her by her fucking ankle. This bit of meat and air. I remember. I was quite astonished because one of the ambulance men spoke English, quite good English. He'd lived in Southampton. And I couldn't help thinking, why the fuck did you have to live in Southampton of all places? The sound of her closing the door with her bags full of yogurt and shampoo and bread and cheese. Takes me completely by surprise. She looks at me across his house. She's wearing sunglasses to protect her against the light. Jesus fuck. He's sitting on his sofa. He's still wrapped in his towel. He's a man that is completely broken. He's a shattered form. The little noises he makes. I leaned over the desk at the check-in at Nice, and we'd been taken to the front of the queue, and we'd actually been given an upgrade. And I was looking at the sheet that the lady was checking off on her desk, and there was a list of passengers, list of the baggage and the crew, and at the end of the list, it read human remains, which was a bit... We're sitting there, the three of us, in the departure lounge. We can't look at each other. We can't touch one another or at anybody else. I turned to him, and this is the cruelest thing I ever did to anybody else. And remember, this is a man I've known him for 10 years, and I love him. I turn to him, I say to him, get back to London. And the noise and the colour and the dirt and the roar of it, I can't actually. What I can't do for now at least is work. There's a lie at the heart of photography that I've always cherished. When you take a photograph of something, what you do is you freeze something that's actually alive. To do this, you need more than anything to believe in life. There's a child outside the window laughing, and in his laugh, there's absolutely no joy or humor. Warning, this vehicle is reversing. I have a complete and total inability to cry. I've been home for 3 weeks. If this can happen, anything can happen. You see, people, when they say to you that they can't imagine not believing in anything because it would be just too depressing, I think there's something sick about that. The level of cowardice in that is just unbearable to me. Just now there was this couple outside, and they were arguing in the street, and it looked like they were deliberately trying to copy characters out of soap operas in the way that they argued. As if the proximity to being like soap characters acts as some kind of consolation. Helen moves around the house. Hold my entire head together. The skin and the shell of me. I'm falling absolutely inside myself. But you can see that. You can see that. In my... Just because we don't know doesn't mean we won't know. We just don't know yet. I think one day we will. I think we will.